Hello, my name is Frank Gaffney. I'm very pleased to be presenting a series of programs on issues of vital importance to North Asia and the wider world, particularly as they relate to the interests of freedom-loving people in places like South Korea and here in the United States. To do that, we're going to turn today to one of our favorite duty experts, Gordon Chang. He is, I believe, not only a preeminent expert on this region and specifically on the Chinese Communist Party that seeks to dominate it and, well, the rest of the world. He's also something of a national treasure in my estimation, and I'm very pleased to be able to continue our visits with you on this occasion. Gordon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Frank.
We spoke in the previous program in this series briefly about North Korea and the role that China has been playing in using it, well, I think of it as an instrument of political warfare. And I want to talk with you a little bit about the nature of that political warfare, and specifically the idea that we would see, at the behest of the South Koreans and at the initiative of the United States Congress perhaps, a treaty between the North Koreans and the United States, the UN command, I guess, that would end at long last the Korean War. I suspect you could hardly find an American who knows the Korean War isn't over. Talk about the status of it, and then we'll get into some of the implications of this initiative.
Well, as an initial matter, Frank, the Korean War is known as the Forgotten War.
Yes.
And matter of fact, when Time magazine actually did a survey of the 25 most important events after World War II, they did not include the Korean War in there, although they did include Star Wars, the movie. The Korean War is not technically over. There was an armistice in 1953. It stopped the fighting. And that armistice continues to today. There's no formal peace treaty, which means that there is a state of war, at least technically, among the UN command, which is led by the United States, South Korea, North Korea, and China.
The armistice was signed and essentially froze in place where the forces were. There's a demilitarized zone between them, of course. South Korea has prospered magnificently in this post-armistice period. The North, not so much. If we were, in fact, to see a treaty replacing the armistice, there's a lot of talk about one of the upshots of that would be to clear the way for unification. The question is on whose terms and with what collateral damage. Walk us through what that scenario might look like, Gordon.
Well, every Korean leader, both North and South, has talked about unification and has been in favor of it. But the question is, how is that unification going to occur? The North Koreans talk about absorbing South Korea. They invaded in 1950. They have not given up their ambitions to rule the entire peninsula. And of course, South Korean leaders, they try to come to some terms with the North, but they really can't because the North is a militant regime that demands complete sovereignty over the peninsula.
This particular South Korean regime under the presidency of Moon Jae-in is very keen, it seems, on a unification and not so concerned about it possibly being on the terms of the North. What would that mean for the people of South Korea if, in fact, his vision were to flow from a treaty that ends the armistice and presumably results in, what, the removal of U.S. forces that have helped protect South Korea all these years?
Well, Moon Jae-in personally abhors Americans. He may say that he's in favor of the alliance and that it should exist forever, as he's done. But we know from what he's done and what he's said that he thinks the United States is an obstacle to what he sees as his most important goal, and that is the unification of the two Koreas. Just to give you an example, when President Trump went to Korea and he stood with Moon Jae-in and the First Lady had the blue butterfly brooch. And, we could say, oh, how nice. But the blue butterfly is a symbol of anti-Americanism. So really what Moon Jae-in was doing was he was disrespecting not only President Trump, he was disrespecting the United States and this whole notion that the U.S. stands with South Korea. I mean, Moon, the first thing he did as president when he was inaugurated in May 2017, the following month he put a freeze on emplacements of the THAAD, the Theater Air Defense system that the U.S. built. He stopped that. And then also at October 2017, soon after he became president, without consulting the U.S., he agreed to the 3 no's with China, which meant no more THAAD batteries, also no participation of South Korea in ballistic missile defense, and no participation of South Korea in a trilateral alliance with the U.S. and Japan. And this is, one can argue about the 3 no's, but not talking to his alliance partner really was a violation of any sense of treaty partner. So Moon wants the U.S. off the peninsula. Fortunately, the South Korean people don't agree with him.
The North Korean regime seems to have that very much as a fixed idea, though, and are, I assume, only too happy to accommodate Moon on this proposition that if the U.S. is kicked out, that the unification of the peninsula, one way or the other, will flow from it. If you were to make book on this, Gordon, would you anticipate that it would be through violent means, which the regime clearly fancies, or through the surrender of the South? And what would the implications of that be, again, for the people of South Korea as well as, our vital interests in the region more broadly?
Well, if Moon had his way, I think that what he would do is take down the important elements of South Korea's democracy to make South Korea more compatible with the North. And we don't really have to speculate about this because his Democratic Party of Korea actually tried to amend the South Korean constitution to take out the notions of freedom. And so Moon, his overriding goal is unification and not on South Korea's terms. Matter of fact, I think he's the first Korean leader, both North or South, to favor the unification proposals of the other side.
Wow. This is stunning, really. And I think most Americans are unaware of just how problematic he is. And it's the old line about with friends like Moon Jae-in, who needs enemies. But Gordon, if there were, in fact, essentially a Korean peninsula dominated by the North, what would that mean for the region more generally and specifically China's larger ambitions? Talk a little bit about the relationship between the Chinese and the North Koreans as they stand now, and then we'll get into what it might look like under those other circumstances.
Yeah. If we go back to the middle part of last decade, there was a lot of arguments among Korea analysts about how much control China actually had over North Korea. Because, for instance, Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, he actually, in his first summit with President Trump, said, oh, no, we can't control the Koreans. But we saw a graphic illustration of direct Chinese control over North Korea. And that occurred, Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, went to China 4 times before Xi Jinping went to North Korea. And that was a real demonstration of the power of China over Pyongyang. Matter of fact, Kim Jong-un, he wanted his first foreign trip to be to the demilitarized zone to meet with Moon Jae-in. In other words, a meeting of the 2 Koreas. China, when it got wind of this, said no. And Kim Jong-un actually traveled to Beijing as his first foreign trip. Matter of fact, one of those 4 trips was actually on Kim Jong-un's birthday. He spent it in the Chinese capital. So that really shows you. When Kim Jong-un went to Singapore to meet President Trump in the historic summit in 2018, he flew on a Chinese jumbo, which was a message to Trump that we Chinese, we own North Korea.
Right. And as I recall, on each of those occasions where he was meeting with Donald Trump, he had to check in with Xi Jinping or his minions before he made that excursion. Again, the message couldn't have been more clear. These guys work for us. Which brings me to this point, Gordon. In previous efforts to achieve some kind of understanding with the North Koreans, whether it was on peace on the peninsula, or whether it was on denuclearization or at least limiting their nuclear weapons program, we were always told that you had to have the help of the Chinese Communist Party to do that. They were our interlocutors necessarily. Is that in fact the case? And have we paid through the nose for what's not actually been that much help?
Yeah. The administration of George W. Bush started the six-party talks process, and essentially the Bush administration put its relations with China above denuclearizing North Korea because they wanted to try to engage China to bring it along so that China would play a responsible role, because the administration felt that the Chinese had a lot of influence. Well, what China did was it used its role in the six-party talks not to denuclearize, quote-unquote, the North Koreans, but really to keep the United States away from North Korea, to protect North Korea. And that's why the six-party talks process failed. Beijing has used North Korea as a weapon against the United States, Japan, South Korea, and indeed the entire international community, because China has used North Korea's weapons program as a way of selling this technology around the world, including to Iran.
What can you tell us about the other forms of Chinese involvement in that nuclear weapons program in North Korea? Is it an exaggeration to say either directly or through another of their proxies or cutouts, Pakistan? They've essentially made that nuclear program possible?
Both of the above. China made sure that North Korea got uranium enrichment technology through Pakistan, through the AQ-Khan black market. But China's also sold materials for North Korea's nuclear weapons program directly across their border. China has also provided the financing for North Korea, and North Korea has used Chinese banks to launder money. China has given North Korea diplomatic support, first at the governing board of the International Atomic Energy Agency, but also at the UN Security Council. So China across the board has made sure North Korea has been able to bedevil the world.
Yeah, and you've also pointed out, Gordon, that they've enabled their missile programs with which to deliver these nuclear weapons as well, including by selling them these so-called transporter erector launchers. Talk about that. The party line, I think, was that no, these were just for hauling lumber around. Do you credit that?
Yeah. China sold at least 6 transporter erector launchers to the North Koreans. And the reason why this was important, Frank, was as weapons of war, North Korea's missiles at that time really weren't that fearsome because they took weeks to transport, to erect, to fuel, and then to finally fire off. We could have destroyed them really easily with 20th century technology. But what makes North Korea a real threat is their transporter erector launchers, which the Chinese sold to the North Koreans. And when the Obama administration—
coupled with solid missile technology.
The solid fuel missiles that North Korea have look like they're based on China's JL-1 submarine-launched missile.
Okay.
And this hypersonic missile that North Korea tested in September, that looks like it must have come from China, because the North Koreans just didn't roll out of bed and develop something that only up to now China, Russia, and the United States have. But putting that aside,
I think
for them,
the Russians and Chinese have more of them by far than we do. So
that's another story as well.
Leg up.
And they're also farther ahead in developing the technology. But the North Koreans did not develop hypersonic warheads on their own.
I think that's true.
They probably 99.99999% got them from China. But these transporter erector launchers showed that China wanted North Korea to be a real threat. And as you point out, when the Obama administration talked to China about this, the Chinese said, well, we just sold them the chassis so they could use them for logging vehicles. Well, first of all, the roads to North Korea's logging areas are more narrow than the transporter erector launchers. But also, North Korea wasn't logging at all because of the severe deforestation of their country. There are a lot of reasons why. Unfortunately, the Obama administration didn't do anything about this, but clearly China wanted North Korea to be a credible threat to the United States.
Yes, and has used it as such, I think it's fair to say. Which brings us to this piece of legislation that has been introduced in the House of Representatives, H.R. 3446, Peace on the Korean Peninsula Act. It sounds so benign. It sounds so...
Who could oppose peace?
Yes, unobjectionable. What's wrong with this legislation as you see it, Gordon? And what motivations do you think are prompting it, at least in this country? We're pretty clear about what's prompting it overseas.
Yeah. Everybody likes the notion of peace, and so there is technically a state of war, and if you had a peace treaty, there would be quote-unquote peace. The real problem, though, is that everybody knows that the leftists in South Korea would say, well, we have a peace treaty, therefore we don't need an alliance with the U.S., we don't need U.S. troops on the peninsula, and the alliance and American forces on the peninsula are what protects South Korea. Matter of fact, they are the guarantees for a peaceful and stable South Korea. So this is the real concern. Moon Jae-in, as much of a leftist as he is, has surrounded himself with pro-North Korean elements as senior advisors. They openly talk about what their plan is, that once they have a peace treaty, they will kick out the Americans and they will welcome in unification on the peninsula. So this is something which is very clear. They've told us what they want to do.
I'm interested in the thought processes here in our country. It seems beyond this idea that just peace is a good thing, why don't we just try to promote peace, that the preponderance, if not virtually everybody who has lined up in the House of Representatives to co-sponsor this legislation are pretty radical leftists. They call themselves progressives, but it seems as though they're more Marxist in character. Do you think those people are being duped or used, at least, by these, South Korean leftists, for starters, but also perhaps as part of the larger Chinese Communist Party political warfare strategy, which, as we've talked about, involves, among other things, influence operations and information warfare, the United Front strategy to try to get stuff done that subverts our country and makes theirs stronger.
Yeah, I don't know the motivations of Brad Sherman, who sponsored the bill, and co-sponsors, but I am concerned because North Korea works very hard to promote its narratives in the United States. It's got a very well-financed influence operation, and H.R. 3446 is a part of what North Korea is trying to do. So whether they're duped or whether they are conspirators with the North Koreans doesn't matter, because the damage will be there regardless.
Yeah. And I guess that's what's so worrying about this is if the Congress of the United States were on a much broader scale to be seduced with this idea that, well, this is just a feel-good exercise, or this is just going to make the prospects for peace better because it'll clearly align the United States with this notion that we want a permanent agreement, not to live under this armistice any longer, that you could, in fact, see put in train, whether they intend this or not, some very, very problematic forces that could result, as you say, in exactly the opposite of a permanent and enduring peace, but actually a renewed conflict with the North.
For peace on the Korean Peninsula, you can't have the world's most militant regime in the North. It has an enormous army. It's dedicated to the elimination of South Korea, and indeed it sees South Korea as a threat. Remember, the people in North Korea right now are destitute. And the way that the Kim regime has kept people in line is to say, well, look, you're sacrificing for an important ideal, which is the unification of the peninsula under North Korean rule, the Juche system of Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea. That is what's driving this, Frank. And until you have a regime in Pyongyang that really wants real peace, that wants coexistence with South Korea, any sort of change where you have the U.S. leave is going to lead to probably renewed hostility, a conflict, and the extinguishment of a democracy.
Yeah. I think I would argue that you need in South Korea a responsible regime as well to make peace with that will be worth the paper it's written on.
The good thing about South Korea is that it is a democracy and that most people in South Korea want the United States there. When I went with my wife to South Korea in the first part of the century, most young South Koreans were very leftist. They just wanted the U.S. out. Now, the younger South Koreans are pro-America. It's not that they love us, Frank. It's that they realize that in their minds, their country is South Korea. And because of that, they realize that the U.S. is there to protect them. And without the U.S., they wouldn't have their country. Moon Jae-in and his generation, the generations that it's in power, in their mind, their country is not South Korea. Their country is Korea. So for them, they will be willing to sacrifice anything for unification, including democracy, including prosperity, because those are not important. What's important is the unification of the peninsula in their mind. Fortunately, in the South Korean electorate, they don't have that much support. They've got political power, but they don't have the support of the people.
Walk through with us what that means in practical terms, Gordon, because, again, to the extent that some in our audience, at the very least, are Americans and are being represented by people in Congress who will perhaps have to decide whether they want to support this initiative, H.R. 3446, or vote against it. It would seem to me that it would be very important to know what the people of South Korea want, not just what the government is representing them as wanting. If there is that distinction between the public opinion and attitudes towards us or towards this idea of a treaty on the one hand and what the government there is doing, does it matter as long as the Moon regime has political power what the people of South Korea want? And how could we help them be more impactful on policy that's in our interest as well as that of South Korea?
Well, Moon's term, his single term, ends soon. There's going to be an election in March, a presidential election. And what's interesting about South Korean politics is that there's been a pattern recently where you've had two conservative presidents and then two progressive presidents. And Moon would be the first of the progressive presidents. But this pattern might actually be broken because Moon has become unpopular. Mm-hmm. And it's not really his Korea policies that have driven this so much. It's just that his socialist-like policies have failed to produce economic growth, and because of some other failures. But people are really reacting to this. And so there is some hope that there will be a conservative president after the March election.
But if you had an opportunity to, for example, talk to Brad Sherman or others contemplating H.R. 3446, what would your message be beyond that it's not going to conduce to what you want, namely peace on the peninsula and possibly actually create the basis for war, but also to this point about, actually ensuring that it reflects the will of the Korean people, particularly with respect to the treaty, but also with respect to the U.S. alliance with South Korea as well.
Yeah, the most important thing is that the peace treaty is really not important. It's really having a regime in Pyongyang that is willing to deal with South Korea on a fair basis, that has given up its territorial claims to the South, that really believes in peace. And once you have that, then a peace treaty, of course, is something that everyone would want. Mm-hmm. But until that happy day occurs, and that's not on the horizon, then we have to have the status quo. The status quo has permitted the extraordinary rise of South Korea, the miracle on the Han, as it's called. And it's because the United States has guaranteed peace and security on the peninsula. That's the reason why South Korea has been successful. And that would be my message to Brad Sherman. It's not the question of whether we have an armistice or a peace treaty. It's a question of the nature of the North Korean regime. It's militant, it's belligerent, and it wants to destroy South Korea.
And it is in our interest that we prevent that from happening.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that elegant conclusion to this really important conversation about a public policy decision that I think most of us are unaware is in the offing. That's the focus of these programs. I hope that you will join us for more in this series where we focus on both the North Asian challenges to freedom as well as those we are facing more broadly around the world. It's all part of the big picture that we're going to be focusing on here. I'm pleased to be able to be part of it. This is Frank Gaffney. Thanks for joining us.